I will say good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking our sponsors, our TALMUD TORAH sponsors, Shmuel Leba Dinovitz, in dedicating the Shurman Drushos this month in the zechus of an aliyas for the neshama of HaRav Peretz Avraham ben Harav Benyamin Moshe zechus. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, the neshama will have an aliyah and the family a neshama. Both said today's daf is Kuf Tes Zayin 116, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Kuf Tes Vav Amud Beis 115b. We're picking up about 22 lines up from the bottom. So we have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. Just a little bit of a reminder, a reorientation. So remember again, we left off by the interesting case of Ruvain deposited sesame seeds with Shimon, and then comes back to reclaim them from Shimon. Shimon says, you took them already. Ruvain says, no, I didn't, and here's the raya, here's the proof. And Ruvain proceeds to go on and explain how many sesame seeds, what the nature of the barrel was. And Shimon claims, while that is all true, Lamaisa, it's mine. In other words, I took yours out and I put mine in. That then led into a discussion of, do we accept a claim like this, that ultimately, again, a depositor was, or I should say a custodian, was watching something, holding something, but then swapped out that which belonged to the other individual for his own items. So says the Gemara, are we not concerned, right? Do we not accept the claim that halacha l'maisa, the custodian cleaned out the other guy's stuff in order to make room for his own? Ema seifa, Rabbi Yossi omer afilu matzah chavis v'kasav alei truma hare elu chulin. Rabbi Yossi says that, again, the seifa of the rice that we started quoting yesterday, even if you went ahead and you found the barrel and it says truma on it, ultimately, again, you could assume that the truma items were cleaned out and replaced with chulin. Shani omer ishtakit havei truma ufina. Because I could say yesterday it was filled with truma, but then ultimately, again, the owner of the barrel cleaned it out and replaced it with chulin. Here's the machlokas. So here's the machlokas in the sesame case. Mar savar im isa dipinohu Michbar hava kafer. So we'll say one opinion says that halacha l'maisa. So we'll say here's the problem with this particular case. The problem with this case is that on the barrel itself, there was a siman, right? There was a siman. Remember again, it said tough for truma. So one opinion holds that if it's true that the owner really cleaned out the contents, he would have also erased the mark, the tough, right? The saf on the barrel itself. The Gemara says v'idach emar ishtaluye ishtali. The other opinion says, no, he just forgot to do it. Inami lepanchia shafke. Or maybe he purposely left the tough on there. Why? Because this way people will stay away from his stuff. Since on the barrel it says tough for truma, halacha l'maisa, people will stay away from his stuff and they won't come to tamper with his merchandise. Okay, so we'll say, so bottom line, that halacha l'maisa, that we would paskin in a case like this, where Shimon is coming and claiming that the sesame seeds are his. As I mentioned yesterday, this is hamotzi mechavera alav haraya. In general, whenever you want to extract money from someone, the burden of proof is always upon the extractor, because as they say, right, I guess we hold to this concept also of possession is 9/10 of the law. Whoever has possession of the item is the presumed owner. If you want to change that status quo, that's fine, you could do that, but the burden of proof is upon the person who wants to affect the level of change. Beautiful. Says Yevamos, 2 dots. A very interesting case. Yitzchak Reish Galusa bar Achse Dirav Bibi. So we'll say Yitzchak Reish Galusa. This was his name. He wasn't the Reish Galusa, right? You know, it's like naming your kid president, right? So ultimately, the Yitzchak Reish Galusa was the son of the sister of Rav Bibi. Okay. Havaka'azil me Kurtava la Aspamya. He was traveling from Kurtava to Aspamya, v'shachiv, and he died. He died en route. Shalchu mehasam, so they sent out word. Yitzchak Reish Galusa bar Achse Rav Bibi havi ka'azal mekortava la'aspamya v'shachiv. Also, they sent out word. Now, why did they send out word? He was married, so they wanted his wife to know. Listen, your husband died. Sorry. Good. They wanted to send that word. Your husband died. So the Gemara says, here's the question. So now word gets back that, remember again, he was from, I don't know if he was from, but he was from Kortva Taspamya. So let's say word now gets back to his wife, or word gets back that a man by the name of Yitzchak Reish Galusa died. So we'll say, here's the Shaila. Mi chayshinan l'trei Yitzchak olo. Are we choshesh for two Yitzchaks? Right? In other words, we'll say a fundamental question. You hear news that a guy died. So halacha l'maisa, do you have to be concerned that there's more than one person with that same name? So we'll say, and again, what's the ramifications of this? Ramifications of this is, so Yitzchak Reish Galusa dies, a woman hears about this. She has a husband by the name of Yitzchak Reish Galusa, who is traveling from Kortova to Aspamya. So now what's the shaila? Can this woman get remarried based on this testimony? Or do we have to assume that maybe there's more than one person with this same name? So Abaye Amar Chashinan, Abaye says we have to be choshesh for a second Yitzchak Reish Galusa. Rava Amar Lo Chashinan. Rava says no, we're not choshesh for a second Yitzchak Reish Galusa. Amar Abaye says Mina Aminala. From where do I know that you don't have to be choshesh? So we'll say, here we go. Dahu gita de ishtachach benarda. So we'll say, by the way, this, you have to understand, these cases are incredible because understand, we're used to, like I said yesterday, we're used to instantaneous information. And we're used to the ability to really even verify information quite fast. Just like yesterday, we saw this case of where the woman comes to Beis Din and she informs us that there's war, right? We didn't know. The Beis Din didn't know there's a war going on. She told us there's a war. So here, this guy, Yitzchak Reish Galusa, dies. So the shaila just is, do you have to be choshesh for us that there are more than one person with the same name? Abaye says yes. Rava says no. So I'm not Abaye says, how do I know that you have to be choshesh for two people with the same name? Dahu gita, ishtachach benarda. Listen to this. They once found a get document in Narda, and what happened? Uksiv besad kalunya masa, anna androlinoi Narda patris vitaraches yas pelonis ans insisi. So we'll say, so they found the get. And in the get, well, obviously was the people's names. And what did it say? It said as follows. The get was found in Narda, right, on the side of Kalunya Masa, the city of Kalunya. And in it said, I, Andrulinoi Narda, Andrulina from Narda, I divorced my wife, so and so and so and so. So we'll say, so they found this get. Now what happens? So Mrs. Andrulinoi wants her get. She's claiming she lost her get. Right? Her name is in there, her husband's name is in there. But we'll say, but what's the shaila? Do we have to be choshesh? Maybe, well, there's a couple of things to be choshesh for. Number one, you could say that maybe he never delivered it to her. But leaving that aside, do we have to be choshesh for maybe there's another couple with the same name? Another couple, we're going to spend much time on this in Maseches Gittin, but is there another couple with the same name? To which the Gemara says, V'shalcha avua de Shmuel l'kamei Rabbi Yehuda nisiya. So we'll say, what happened? They sent it to the father of Shmuel in front of Rabbi Yehuda. V'shalach lei tibdak narda kula. And the father avua de Shmuel, the father of Shmuel, said, he paskin, you have to go ahead and check narda. You have to go ahead and do a search in narda. Is there another guy by the name of Angerolinoi? Right? You have to go ahead and check Narda. So I will say, so listen to this. So in other words, you see from here that what? You do have to be choshesh for more than one person with the same name. To which the Gemara says, Rava Amar, Im Isa yibade kala olam ibayle. Rava says, well, if that's the case, that you have to be choshesh, bless you, that in Narda, there's another guy with the same name, you have to check the whole world. In other words, maybe at the end of the day, there's another Angelinois in somewhere else around the world. We'll say in reality they didn't paskin that way. In reality they paskin, you don't have to be choshesh for another person with the same name. So why did they say check the entire Narda? Because of the father of Shmuel. They wanted to give covet to Avua de Shmuel that you should check. But in reality they did not feel that you actually have to check. Interesting. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava, so Rava says, how do I know that you don't have to be choshesh? The Rava say in general, that halacha l'maisa, when you hear information about a particular person, you don't have to be choshesh that there's another person with that same name. So whether that's with the get, whether that's with allowing the wife to remarry. So Rav says, where do I know this from? Da'ano trei shtari denafki b'mechuza. So listen to this, very interesting. There were two documents, loan documents, that they went ahead and they found in mechuzah. And I will say, these are cases of documents that they find on the ground, right? So what happens? Uksiv behu, chavi bar nanoi, vinanoi bar chavi. So we'll say these were two different documents. One document, the creditor was chavi bar nanoi, and the second was nanoi bar chavi. And I will say, these apparently were very common names. Very common names. Right? We'll say that, so apparently again, in mechuzah, this was like going to Crown Heights and saying, does anyone know Menachem Mendel? Right? Again, let's say, Lemaisa in mechuzah, these were very common names. So the Gemara says, so what happened? Va'agbi behu Rava bar Avua Zuzi. And yet, interestingly enough, Rava bar Avua gave the documents back to the creditors and allowed them to use them for collection purposes. To which the Gemara says, "Ayvahav chavi bar nanoi, v'nanoi bar chavi b'mechuza shchichi tuba." Yet Rabbi say again, there's many people by this name, many people who utilize this same name. So Rabbi say, but you see from here that halacha l'maisa, you don't have to be choshesh for multiple people with the same name. In other words, Rabbi say, in these cases, the particular creditor showed up and he said, "This is my document, right? This is my document." So halacha l'maisa, we returned it to him. Okay, Va'abaye, top of Kuftas Zayin. So we'll say, Abaye says this is not a good proof, and I'll tell you why. So we'll say, so remember, you have fundamental machlokes, and by the way, this is a pretty significant machlokes. Again, both for loan documents, for declaring a man dead and allowing his wife to remarry. When we hear that someone has died or something has happened to someone, do we have to be choshesh ultimately again for more than one person with the same name? So Abaye says this is not a good case. I'll tell you why. What do we have to be concerned about? Mishar Zohir. So we'll say, let's analyze this. Right? We're standing in Mechuzah. We find a document that says, Chavi bar Nanoi lent Ruvain $1,000. Chavi bar Nanoi shows up and he says, oh Steve, I wish you a lichtra gan Eden. Emir Hashem. You should just have kol mishalos libecha latova. Incredible. Thank you so much. I appreciate it greatly. No, it's okay. I don't know what I drank. I think it was from last week. I just found it around. It might be from Shuas. I found it around. Does this mean that there's coffee? Okay, good. Baruch Hashem. I'll say there's coffee. All right. Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam shakol niyeh b'dvaro. Okay, so we'll say, so Abaye says like this. The loan document ultimately is a different kind of case. Why? What should we be concerned about? Even a fila, if you're concerned about the fact that maybe what? Maybe the creditor, remember again, obviously in a loan transaction, who's holding on to the document? The creditor, right? Obviously, because again, the document itself is the vehicle of collection. So what should we be concerned about? If you're concerned that maybe what? The creditor dropped the document, mishar zohir bey. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. In other words, at the end of the day, a creditor is very careful with this document. So either pikadon, if you want to say ultimately again it was pikadon, maybe the guy who shows up in Beis Din with the name of Chavi bar Nanoi, he's not really the creditor. Rather what? He's going ahead and holding the document for the real creditor, but the real creditor happens to have the custodian happens to have the same name as the actual creditor, to which the Gemara says, no. Kevan d'shmei kishmei lo mafkid kabei. I will say, in general, and this is good advice, don't deposit loan documents with people who have the same name as you, right? Why? Because Lamaisa, then they could go ahead and collect with that same document. So the Gemara says, Samai Amrs, why do you have to be concerned? Dilma Masalei. So ultimately, maybe you have to be concerned that halacha Lamaisa, maybe the creditor wanted to give over this loan to another person. He gave him over the document, but they never performed the kinyan. So therefore, maybe that's what happened. That's not a concern over here either. Why? Osios niknos b'mesira. Because halacha l'maisa, interestingly enough, you can go ahead and acquire a loan document just by simply giving over the document, even without any other formal get, even without any other formal kinyan. So therefore, I will say, Abaye says, the machlokes still remains. So I will say, so therefore, this case is not totally conclusive, but the machlokes Abaye and Rava still remains. So I will say, essentially, when you hear news about a particular individual, do you have to be choshesh for more than one person with the same name? Another case, we'll say Kuftes Zayin Amud Aleph, 4 lines down. Very interesting. Hahu Gita Dishtachach Besura. We'll say they found the get in the city of Sura. Uksiv Behachi, and the get read as follows. The get read as follows. Besura Masa, in the city of Sura. Ana Anan Barchia Narda. This is the husband, Anan Barchia from Narda. Patris Vitarchis Plonis in Sasi. I divorced my wife, and they put in her name. Ubat Rabbanan Misura va Narda, and the Rabbanan searched from Sura until Narda. V'lo hava Anan Barchia Achrina lebar me Anan Barchia mechagra dehava benarda. And we'll say they did a search, an exhaustive search, and there was no other guy. There was no other guy with the name of Anan Barchia, except for this guy of Anan Barchia from the city of Chagra, who is currently in Narda. Okay. Va'asu sahadi va'amr. And ultimately, again, I will say, so now here's what's interesting. So the witnesses came along and they said, Tahu yoma ki ichtiv hao gita, on that day that the get was written. So the Gemara says, Anan Barchia mechagra gaban hava. So this guy, Anan Barchia, was with us in Narda. He was with us in Narda. So says the Gemara, he was with us in Narda. So the Gemara says, good. So the Gemara says, Amar Abaye. So Abaye says, Af lididi da'amina chashinan. Even according to me, who says normally you have to be choshesh, again, for more than one person with the same name, hachalo chashinan. Here, there's nothing to worry about. Here's nothing to worry about. Why? Because ultimately, again, that's which we said, that the witnesses said that he was in Narda. So the Gemara says, that's which we said ultimately, again, that halacha lamaisa, he was in Narda. My by besura. Ultimately, again, what was he doing in Surah? So again, I will say, so the Gemara says, Abaye says, even I who normally are choshesh, are not choshesh in this particular case. Amar Rava says just the opposite. Af lididi delo chayshinan. Even me who says that normally I'm not choshesh for two guys with the same name. Hacha chayshinan. Here I would be choshesh. Why? Dilma, is very interesting. Dilma, begam la parcha azil. Maybe the way he was able to get from point A to point B so quickly was how he had a flying camel. I will say flying camel doesn't have to literally mean a flying camel, but a very fast camel. Rashi says, Gam la parcha, holech maher ka'of poreach. Mamish, it flies 0 to 60 in 3.5 minutes, right? So I'll say, so ultimately, again, says the Gam la parcha, inami bikfitza. And I will say, bikfitza is interesting. Maybe he got from one location to the other. Rashi says, ayidei shem. He knows the Shem HaMeforash, right? The ineffable name of Hashem. And therefore, again, he used the Shem to get from one location to another. Inami mili masar. Or I will say, the other possibility is, he was in a different location. Rav L'Safri, v'chein Amrlu Rav Huna L'Safri, ki isnuchu b'shili, ksovo b'shili, afagav demimseran mili behini. So Rabbi says, interesting halacha. We'll see this in Gittin, that when you are in Shili, when the get is being written in Shili, ultimately, again, write the location of Shili, even though the instructions for giving the get ultimately, again, were given in Hini. So Rabbi says, actually an interesting halacha in Hilchos Gittin. The location written in the get is the location where the get itself is actually written, even if what? The husband gave the instructions to the sofer to write the get in a different location. Now, we'll say, we'll get into this in Gittin, but we're going to see that's even true, even if the husband is not with the sofer, when the sofer is actually writing the get. So the idea over here is, Rabbi say, so you could have a husband who was in a different location than where the get was being written. How could such a thing happen? It's very simple. the husband gave the instructions to the sofer in one city, but the get is written in a different city. And when that happens, which city do you write in the get? You write the city where the get is being written, even though instructions were given in a different city. So Gemara says, "V'chi isnechu." We'll say first wide line, Kuf Tezayin Amud Aleph. "V'chi isnechu behini, ksovu behini." So too, ultimately, again, when the get is being written in hini, write the location of hini. Afal gav demimsiran mili b'shili. Even though halacha l'maisa, the husband gave the instructions for the get in the city of Shili. Good. So we'll say, so therefore, again, you can't bring a ride from this case as well. So my havi alayu. So we'll say, so again, I just want to point out, so where we leave, we're not leaving off, but where we are right now is, we still have our fundamental machlokes Abaye and Rava, which I will say is a general machlokes when you hear information about a particular person. I will say, so far again now, there's like 3 different examples of this. There's example number 1 where you hear that a man died. News comes that a man died. So you have to be choshesh that there's 2 guys with the same name, right? Case number 2, loan document, right? You find the loan document. Creditor shows up and says, hey, that's my name. Do we have to be choshesh for what? 2 creditors with the same name. And now again, I both say get case, same idea as the creditor case, get case. You find the get, husband shows up, or wife shows up for that matter, says that's my get. Do you have to be choshesh? There, I both say it's even more complicated. You have to be choshesh for another couple with the same names. But it's the same basic idea. To which the Gemara says, so this is machlokes Abaye and Rava. So I both say the Gemara loops all the way back. The Gemara says, by the way, the shumshimi, so my havi alai the shumshimi. By the way, what happened with the sesame case? Right, I must say, remember again, how did this all start? This whole thing started with the case of the sesame seeds. Remember again, one more time, Ruvain deposits sesame seeds with Shimon, shows up, says, Shimon gave back my sesame seeds. Shimon says, what are you talking about? I gave you back your sesame seeds. The sesame seeds in the barrel are my sesame seeds. To which Reuven says, I never got it back to you, and I'll give you a proof. I'll give you a raya. Number one, there's a big reish on the barrel that stands for Reuven. Number 2, there's 20 pounds of sesame seeds. Now, it turns out that Reuven gives the right simanim. So what's the halacha, Rabosai? Rav Yema Amar Lo Chashinan, Ravina Amar Chashinan. So Rav Yemar says, we do not believe that Shimon took out the contents of Reuven's sesame seeds and replaced them with his own. Ravina says, yes, we are choshesh. We'll say choshesh ultimately, we'll say that choshesh doesn't mean in a bad way. Choshesh means we accept the claim of Shimon that Shimon repaid Reuven his sesame seeds, and the sesame seeds that are in the barrel are no longer Reuven's, but rather they're Shimon's. That's what it means when we say chashinon, that we accept the approach that Shimon, the custodian, gave back to Reuven what was Reuven's, and now replaced the contents of the barrel with his own sesame seeds. And Rabbi say the halacha is chashinon, that we accept Shimon's claim, namely that he gave Reuven back his sesame seeds, and the sesame seeds inside of the barrel are in fact Shimon's sesame seeds. And I both say, that is halacha l'maisa. Now again, like I said before at the beginning of the shir, it's not a chiddush. Why isn't it a chiddush? Because what principle is really being applied over here? In general, again, I will say, if you show up, I show up, I say, you owe me $1,000, that's fine. I'm entitled to make nothing stops you from making the claim. But Lamaisa, the burden of proof rests upon me, the extractor. So in this case, again, if Reuven wants to claim, and I will say, by the way, the fact that Reuven says there's 20 pounds of sesame seeds inside of the barrel, that's not a raya. Even that he says that there's a reish on the barrel, that's not a raya. That's not a raya, because I will say in general, giving the weight of an item is not a defining siman. Or for that matter, even putting a reish on the barrel is not a defining siman that is yours. Okay, so we'll say, by the way, so that's how you pass in the case of the sesame seeds. I will say, in a general sense, we also pass in like Rava, of lo chashinon. We're not normally concerned with 2 people with the same name. Now, the truth is, we'll see in Hilchos Gittin, this halacha is applied a little bit differently. Well, we'll get to that in Hilchos Gittin, but at least for our purposes, I must remember, how did this all start? This whole thing started with Yitzchak Reish Galusa, the son of the sister of Rav Bibi, who was traveling from Cortova to Aspamia. He died. They sent back information to Cortova. This guy, Yitzchak Reish Galusa died. I will say, so what was the whole shaila? Do we have to be choshesh for 2 guys with the same name? We paskin, no. We paskin like Rava, that lo chayshina. And again, I will say now the application of this halacha is going to vary a little bit from case to case, but bigadol, in a general sense, we pass like Rava. Beautiful. Both says Kavaiter. Kitata ben olubena. Both say, so now we're on Kuf Tez Zayin Lod Aleph 116a, 6 lines up from the bottom. So also going back to our Mishnah. What did our Mishnah say? Halacha l'maisa. A woman shows up, a woman goes with her husband to overseas. She comes back and she says, my husband died. So remember again, the Mishnah said that halacha l'maisa, we accept that testimony, assuming that there are 2 criteria in place. Number one, shalom ba'olam, there's no war, right? And number 2, there's no strife, there's shalom between them. Now both say, we assume that the de facto state of marriage is shalom. Now let's go out for just a moment. We said, why can't there be war in the world? Because remember again, as we saw in yesterday's daf, we're concerned that ultimately, again, if there's war, she's going to rely on a umdina deliba. That maybe she didn't actually see him die, but rather, again, she saw a fierce battle, and she assumed that he's dead. Now, again, she's not trying to, she's just making an assumption. If there's strife between 2 of them, B'pashtus, we assume that she's not going to be so careful also to vet her words. So says the Gemara, Rabbi say, what does it mean when we say that there's marital strife? How would that manifest itself? Some Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, ba'omeres labayla gershani. She says to her husband, I want a divorce. Right? She gets angry and she says to her husband, I want you to divorce me. The Gemara says, I don't know, kulhu nami amri hachi, right? Everybody kind of has a fight like that over. But I would say, so affirming, right? This is the beauty of Torah. Torah is so life affirming, right? So everybody has kind of had a heated discussion like that. So the Gemara says, at some point in time, every woman gets so fed up with her husband that she makes a statement like that. Rashi says over here, Amruhachi b'shas kason. Say again, every couple has a fight where, again, in the heat of the moment, someone says words like that. And again, in this case, they're saying the Gemara says a woman says words like that. Ela ba'omeres lebayla gerashtani. Oh, and also we're talking about a case over here where what? Where halacha l'maisa, she claims to her husband, "You divorced me." She says, "You divorced me." Says you divorced me. Says the Gemara, Filehemna. So, the truth is, if she makes a claim like that, she should be believed. Why? Rav Hamnuna, Isha sha'amra labayla girashtani ne'emenes. Rav Hamnuna says, if a woman says to her husband, you have divorced me, she is believed. Why? Chazoka ein isha mi'iza panea bifnei bayla. Both say because we assume that a woman would not be so brazen to make a claim like that in front of her husband. In other words, to claim in front of her husband that my husband divorced me, when she knows it's not true, he knows it's not true, that would just be a level of brazenness that we assume that most people don't have. Therefore, if Hamnuna says, if she does make that claim, we would believe her. Shabbos say, so what's the case? In other words, so again, it can't be kitata, right? So kitata can't be that she says, I want a divorce, because again, every couple has a fight that rises to that level of intensity. It can't be where she says, you divorced me, because if she claims you divorced me, then halacha l'maisa what? She should be believed. So what's the case? To which the Gemara says, what's the case? What is the case? Ella, the Gemara says, ba'omeres girashtani b'fnei ploni uploni. So also here's the case. The woman claims, my husband divorced me. And here are the witnesses. He divorced me in front of Reuven and Shimon. Vishaline, we asked Reuven and Shimon, va'amru lo hayu dvar me'olam. And Reuven and Shimon says, never happened. I don't know what she's talking about. There was never a divorce. So I'll say, so ultimately, again, what does that show us? So I'll say, what does that show us? No one shows us they're not divorced. What else does it show us? They might not be divorced, but they're also what? Clearly not happily married. Right? So I will say that's kitata. That's remember, we're trying to figure out what's an example of kitata, what's an example of marital discord that would not allow us to accept her testimony when she shows up in Beis Din and says, my husband is dead. So I will say, so if we know that this couple has a history of marital strife, what's a good example of marital strife? She's made a claim that her husband divorced her in front of witnesses. We go, we check out, they come in front of the witnesses. The witnesses says, we have no idea what she's talking about. That's a pretty good indication that the marriage is not holding in a good place. When a woman like that shows up in Beis Din, or I should say a woman like that, when a woman with that kind of marriage shows up in Beis Din and says, my husband is dead, we can't just simply accept her word for it. So says the Gemara, let's analyze this a little bit. My time with the kitata. Now we'll say, why is that? Why is that in a situation of marital discord, we just can't simply accept her testimony? So Rav Chanina Amar Mishum de Meshakra. Rav Chanina says that ultimately, again, we're concerned that she's lying. That at the end, that's what we're concerned about. That maybe she's just simply not telling the truth. Rav Sheshes Bar Ashi Amar Rav Simi, Bar Ashi Amar Mishum da Amra Bididami. See, Rabbi, here's what's interesting. So the first opinion says, because there's such marital discord, we're actually going to assume, we have to be concerned that maybe she's going to lie. She obviously wants out of this marriage of a haraya. She claimed that she was divorced. She mamish claims that she was divorced. So now if she's willing to make up a claim like that, and now again her husband's not here, we have to be concerned that maybe she's going to literally lie and say my husband is dead when he's not. Second opinion says, no. She's not going to lie. She's not going to lie. A woman's not going to lie that her husband is dead. But Rabbi say, what will she do? Bididami. Rabbi say, it goes back to yesterday's daf. What's bididami? What we call, Rabbi say, important phrase, umdina deliba. That she will rely on circumstantial evidence to say that her husband is dead. So Rabbi say, what's a good case like that? It's a good case. She saw her husband stabbed, right? She runs away to save her own life, understandable, right? And halacha l'maisa, she assumes he's dead. Right? Did she see him die? No. Or it was a famine. She left him with a little bit of flour. She assumes he's dead. That's the concern. So I will say, given the fact that there's a certain level of marital discord, we assume that she's going to simply rely on circumstantial evidence to point to the fact that he's dead without really knowing that he's dead. So my I will say, so what's an afkamina between these two opinions? Amud Beis will say, Kuftes Zayin Amud Beis. Ika Benaihu, the argil. Ultimately, you know, we'll say, the argil hu kitata. This is interesting. What's the nafkamina between these two approaches? If the husband is the instigator of the marital discord. Right? We'll say, very interesting. So we'll say, if he is the instigator of the marital discord, which means he's the problem. In other words, I should say he's the problem. He's the instigator. So we'll say, in that case, it could very well be that his animosity towards her is greater than her animosity towards him. If that's the case, then if the concern is because she's going to lie, in this case she wouldn't lie. Why wouldn't she lie? Because she's not the instigator of the sin, right? She's not the instigator of the kitata. But if we're concerned about her relying on circumstantial evidence, that concern may still apply over here. Okay, so we'll say Bailahu. So we'll say, so again, so I just want to point out, so now we understand that Lamaisa, again, the reason why the Mishnah says that if there's the Mishnah says that if there is a state of marital discord and she shows up in Beis Din and says, my husband is dead, we cannot rely on her eidos. Now I will say, it doesn't mean that we totally discount. We can launch an investigation, basically launch an investigation, but she cannot go ahead and simply get remarried based on her own statement, in a state of marital discord. Again, why? Again, I will say, so that seems to be a machlokes. Either A, because of potential, she's going to rely on circumstantial evidence, or even more dramatic possibility that she's going to lie. Says the Gemara, Ibailu, Eid Echad Bekitat Amar. I will say, very interesting case. What happens, right? Rachel is married to Reuven. They have a bad marriage. Everyone knows they have a bad marriage, right? They're fighting. Gerashtani, she made the claim Gerashtani. He's an instigator. She's an instigator. He's an instigator. Terrible. So what happens, Rabbi say? So now, an Eid Echad shows up and says Reuven's dead. Right? So Eid Echad shows up, Reuven's dead. So we'll say, what's the halacha? So remember again, Rabbi say, normally Eid Echad shows up and says that the husband is dead. What's the halacha? We accept it. She can remarry. What happens in a case of an Eid Echad who shows up in a situation of marital strife, marital discord? Mao. Rabbi say, this is fascinating. Listen to this chakira. My time, Rabbi say, Mao, what's the halacha? So here we go, Rabbi say, it's a chakira in why we believe Eid Echad. My time, the Eid Echad mehemin. Why do we believe in Eid Echad? Mishum de milsa davida legiluye lo meshaker. Hachanami lo meshaker. Rabbi say, do you know why we believe in Eid Echad? Because we assume that an Eid Echad is not going to lie in a situation where the truth will come to light. Now, as Rabbi say, in general, this is good to know. don't lie about people being dead if they're not dead. You know why? You're going to look foolish when they show up to Shachris the next morning, right? So I'll say no matter. So therefore, again, people don't lie about things. People only lie about things that they feel they can get away with. But if something could easily be revealed, people won't lie. So I'll say, why do we believe in Eid Echad? Because what, a guy's going to show up in Beis Din and say that Ruvain's dead when they don't know that Ruvain's dead? Crazy. Reuven shows up the next day, the next week, the next year, and they're going to look like a liar. So that's why we believe in Eid Echad. Sefer will say the truth is when Eid Echad shows up and says that Reuven is dead, even if Reuven and Rachel had a terrible marriage, it doesn't matter. We believe the Eid Echad. Oh, Dilma, no. The other possibility is no. Time of the Eid Echad mehem mishum dehi daiko minsaba. No, Rabbi say that's not the reason. Why do we believe in Eid Echad? Rabbi say this goes back to fundamental. Why do we believe in Eid Echad? And because we believe that at the end of the day, the woman is going to launch her own exhaustive investigation before she gets remarried. Why? Because also at the end of the day, if they're wrong about this information, who's left? Who's left carrying the bag on this? The woman. Because now I both say, if she's wrong about her intel, if she's wrong about it, and she gets remarried, she marries Shimon, and now it turns out Reuven comes along and shows up. Now Rachel committed adultery. If she had kids, they're mamzerim, and we have some significant issues. That's why we believe in Eid Echad. But I both say, in this case over here, v'hacha kevan de'isle kitata lo daiko minsava. But I both say, in this case over here, because there's marital discord, we have to be concerned that what? She's not going to do her investigation. And therefore she's getting around. So I'll say, by the way, I just want to point out, it's such a fundamental, we saw this already before, but it's such a fundamental chakira, such good lumdus in terms of why do we believe Eid Echad? Do we believe Eid Echad because a person is not, in this case, that a husband died, because a person is not going to lie about something, about a milsa da'avida legiluye, a matter that is going to become revealed? That's why we believe him. And therefore, again, I will say, all right, or no, Eid Echad gives the woman a license to get remarried, but we presuppose she's going to launch her own thorough investigation to make sure that the Eid Echad is correct. And we'll say, what's the nafkamina? The nafkamina is when Reuven and Rachel had a bad marriage. If we assume that the din of Eid Echad is believed because, again, a person doesn't lie, but something's going to become revealed, we could believe the Eid Echad. We don't care about the quality or lack of in the marriage. However, if the reason we believe in Eid Echad is because we assume the woman is going to launch her own investigation, well, the truth is in a case of marital discord, she may be more than happy to what? To what? Just rely on the Eid Echad and let's move on. So we'll say, so which approach is correct? Teiku. So we'll say, this is one of these interesting ideas in halacha where we know what the halacha is. We believe in Eid Echad. We believe in Eid Echad when he says the husband died, but we don't know exactly what the svara is for it. Now, I will say, therefore, again, in this case of kitata, again, we might be a little bit stuck. Very interesting. Rabbi Yehuda Amar the Olam Eina. So also remember again, last part of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said, even if there's peace in the world and peace in their marriage, when a woman shows up in Beis Din and says, my husband is dead, we only believe her when? If her clothing is torn, her hair is disheveled, and she's crying. As Rabbi Yehuda says, we need some external displays of mourning to make sure that this is legit. Says the Gemara. So Tanya Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Lidvaracha pikachas tinase shota lo tinase. So it says Rabbi Yehuda, according to you, a normal woman could go, a typical woman could get remarried, but a shota cannot. I was supposed to say, what they're saying over here is like this. So not everybody emotes in the same way. So let's say a shota. Now shota literally means a person who lacks capacity. But it could also mean just a person who doesn't display emotion. So what does that mean? Let's say a person just not an emotive individual. Not everybody mourns. You see this right? You see people who at a levaya, at a shiva, are inconsolable. Right, wailing, not with an H, A-I, right? Again, I will say, so it's like wailing, like mamish going totally lost, and people who are stoic. And I would say it's interesting. Sometimes you look at stoic people, you're like, what's the matter with you? So there's nothing the matter with them. People have different emotional dispositions. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, I don't understand. Somebody has to cry, tear their clothes. What's the pshat? So I will say, listen to this. Ela achazu va'achazu tinase. The Rabbanan say no halacha l'maisa, whether you emote, you don't emote. When the woman shows up, I will say, assuming that the two criteria are intact. Shalom in her marriage, shalom in the world, she can get remarried. So the Gemara listen to this story. Hahida asila beidina. There was a woman who showed up in Beis Din. the basin of Rabbi Yehuda. Amrilei, so they listen to this, what I'll say. So she shows up in the basin of Rabbi Yehuda, and they say to her, Sapti balech, listen, do me a favor, right? Eulogize your husband a little bit. Kari manech, do kriya, sasri mazyech, mess up your hair a little bit. So they told her to engage all these, says the Gemara, Alfua shikra in a rabbanon. The rabbis are teaching people to lie? What's going on over here? They're coaching her what to do? No. Svir luhu amritavid haki keche delishrei. So I want to listen to this. She's in the waiting room of Rabbi Yehuda's Beis Din. Rabbi Yehuda's a das yachid. No one holds that you need physical behaviors of mourning, right? Or external behaviors of mourning. No, right? The Rabbi Yehuda is a minority opinion. No one else holds that she has to be crying and wailing and eulogizing and tearing her clothing and messing up her hair. So it's interesting. She's in the waiting room of Rabbi Yehuda's Beis Din, and kind of like the secretary there, right? The secretary of the Beis Din tells her, listen, do me a favor, tear your clothing, cry a little bit, right? Mess up your hair, because Rabbi Yehuda happens to have this hakpada. No one else has. We're both saying, by the way, we don't pass this. We don't pass like Rabbi Yehuda. So they're not coaching her to lie, right? They're just coaching her to do what she needs to do for Rabbi Yehuda's Beis Din. Okay, incredible. So we don't pass in that way. We pass in halacha l'maisa as long as the two criteria are intact. Namely, shalom ba'olam and shalom in her marriage. If a woman shows up and says, my husband is dead, we accept that testimony. Rabbi say, fascinating Mishnah. Beishila omrim, lo shamanu ela baba min hakatzir uba osam adinu kamaisa shaya. Rabbi say, so now, thing in this case, when do we say that a woman is believed to testify that her husband is dead? Beishila says only in the following situation. Number one, where she's coming from the harvest, she's coming from the grain harvest, and they're in the same country together. Ukimai says Shai. And Rabbi say this is exactly how the original episode unfolded. Rabbi say, take a look at Rashi. First Rashi in the Mishnah, 4 lines down from the top in Rashi. Shekach haya hamaisi kinamina lekamon v'lo'atira chacham ela dugmaso she'adara karov lono umirsa savalo meshakra. So Rabbi say, listen to this. Beis Hillel says something quite fascinating. This idea that a woman is believed to go ahead and testify that her husband is dead is only in a very specific scenario, where the husband died harvesting grain. The husband and wife are in the same country. Because that's how the original episode occurred. That's how the original episode occurred. So according to Beis Hillel, she's only believed in a situation where the current situation mirrors the original situation. We'll see in the Gemara what we're talking about over here. To which the Gemara says, Amrullah Beis Shammai says no. Whether they were harvesting grain or harvesting olives, or harvesting grapes, and whether in the same country, different country. Beis Shammai says anytime a woman shows up and testifies that her husband is dead, once again assuming that there's shalom in their marriage, shalom in the world, she's believed. Chacham only gave the example of the harvest because that was the actual case. And Beis Hillel came around and ultimately again agreed with Beis Shammai. I will say this is one of the situations where Beis Shammai was correct and Beis Hillel comes along to paskin like Beis Shammai. I will say, so what's going on over here? Tanya, says the Gemara, Amru lahem Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. So Beis Shammai said to Beis Hillel, Divreichem ein li ela kitzir chitim. Kitzir chitim. I will say, according to Beis Hillel, again, I will say we'll see the ma'aseh, the original event, but according to you, the only time a woman is believed to say that her husband died is when the current situation exactly mirrors the original situation. And that was the case of a wheat harvest. If that's the case, Ketzir Sa'orim Minayin, how do I know that if the husband was harvesting barley and he died, that she can still be believed? The Eini Elakotzer, further I only know that you're talking about harvesting grain. Botzer, grapes, mosek, olives, goder, dates, oder, figs, minai. And also these are all the names of different harvesting for these different types of fruits. How do I know? Ela maise shahaya bekatzir, vodin lekulu. Beis Shammai says there was an original story, and while it's true that the original story happened with wheat, we're not limited to only believing her in a situation where they were harvesting wheat. Rather, again, anything that resembles that original scenario. So too, just like the original case, which we'll see in just a moment, occurred, where husband and wife were in the same country, she's believed in any case, even if they're not in the same country. Beis Hillel says no. A wife is only believed to testify that her husband is dead when they were in the same country together. Ba'os Medina, Dishchichi Inshi Mirsas. Because they'll say, what could happen? When they're in the same country, there are people who know them both, and therefore should be afraid to lie. Medina le Medina, Achar is supposed to say first wide line, but from one country to another country, where people might not know. She claims their husband died in Africa, right? And now they're in America. People don't know them. Ultimately, again, she would lie. Lo mirsas. She won't be afraid to lie. Beishamai says, Hachanami shrichi shayarta. I will say people travel from place to place. Okay, so my Maisa, I will say what was my Maisa? What was this original story that occurred? Right? What was this original event that occurred? So watch this. I will say Damar Rav Yehuda Shmuel Shilfi Katzer Chitin. I will say it was the end of the wheat harvest. Was the end of the wheat harvest. And I will say there were 10 people who it was a group of people who went to harvest wheat together. So a snake bit one of the men, we'll call him Ruvain, a snake bit one of the men, and he died. And what happened? A woman came to Beis Din and she said, my husband was harvesting wheat and he died by a snake bite. And ultimately Beis Din sent out an agent and they found that her story was correct. So Ba'osa Shah, Rabbi say in that moment they decreed, Ha'isha sha'amra meis ba'ali tinase, meis ba'ali tisyave. So we'll say this was the test case. This was the first case. Woman went with her husband and a group of people to harvest wheat. At the end of the harvest season, husband is bitten by a snake. He dies. Wife shows up in Beis and says, my husband is dead. Then Rabbi say, in this case, interestingly enough, what happened? They launched an investigation. Right here, they did an investigation. So Allah Kalamai said they investigate. It turns out that she's correct. And they pass in halacha. From here, we'll say, this case set a precedent. What was the precedent? If a woman shows up in Beis Din and says, my husband is dead, ultimately, again, we believe her. But I will say, so now what's the machlokes? The machlokes, or they believe her to remarry, they believe her to allow to do yibum. So I will say, ultimately, again, the machlokes Hashem Beis Hillel is, do subsequent cases have to exactly mirror the original case or not? Beis Hillel says yes. Every subsequent case has to mirror the precedent case, has to mirror the original case. Beis Shammai says no. Beis Shammai says no, they do not. So we'll say that's the machlokes. So name Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva v'Rabbanan bepuktu Beis Shammai Beis Elka miflagi. So we'll say that Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva and Rabbanan argue in Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, because we'll say what happened. This Anya. Here we go. We'll say another interesting case. Lo yisa adam mechatas ve'efer chatas v'yavrein b'yardenu b'sina. Well, listen to this. A person, we'll see why this is, but a person should not take mechatas, Rabbosai, are waters of the paraduma, right? Water in which paraduma ashes have been mixed in, or the actual ashes of paraduma. A person cannot transport paraduma waters or paraduma ashes on the Yarden, on the Jordan River, ubesvina, and on a boat. So we'll say, you cannot transport paraduma ashes or paraduma water over the Jordan River by boat. You can't stand on one side of the river and throw it to the other side of the river. Nor can you go ahead and float para aduma ashes or water on top of the water, right? So we'll say, nor can you go ahead and put it on the back of an animal or on the back of your friend, unless, of course, raglov nogos bekarka. In other words, the only way to transport it is how? Is if their feet are touching the ground. But you could transport paraduma water or paraduma ashes over a bridge. Whether it's the Jordan or other rivers as well. Rabbi Chananya ben Akiva Omer, Lo Omer ela biyarden ubesvino k'maisa shaya. Rabbi Chananya ben Akiva says, no, the only thing that's prohibited is to transport para aduma water or para aduma ashes by boat over the Jordan River. That's the only thing that's asur, because that mirrors the original episode. And we'll see what the original episode was in just a moment. Leima Rabbanan Darmi Beis Shammai. So we'll say the Rabbanan say like Beis Shammai, because they take a more broad application. Apparently something happened, and as a result of whatever happened, we say, you know what? You can't transport paraduma waters or ashes by boat at all, or even over the water, or even on the water, or for that matter, on the back of a person, back of an animal walking through the water. Can't do any of that. In order to transport paraduma, ashes, or water, has to be transported by land. By land, because of the story that happened. Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva, Damar Beis Hillel, Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva ever says, no, the only thing you can't do is what? You can't transport it by boat over the Jordan River. That's all. Because that's the original case that happened. They hold like Beis Hillel. To which the Gemara says, not necessarily. Amar lecha Rabbanan, ani damri afke Beis Hillel. The Rabbanan would say, we pass him like Beis Hillel. Ad kan l'kamar Beis Hillel hasam ele mishum de mirsis, b'makam karav mirsis, b'makam rachak lo mirsis. He'll say, Beis Hillel's logic is like this. Why do we believe a woman when she says that her husband is dead? Because l'maisa we assume she's not going to lie. Why isn't she going to lie? Because she's afraid. No, people don't lie about things that they can't get away with. She's afraid if she says my husband is dead and she's lying, her husband's going to show up. Or someone else is going to show up for that matter who knows that her husband's not dead. So Beis Hillel will say like this. Beis Hillel says the mir says that fear of being discovered in the course of lying is only when there is proximity, only when they're in the same country. However, again, the mir says makam karav mir says makam rachak lo mir says hacha mali yarde mali shainar. So we'll say, but over here by the Parah Aduma, what is it? Once we say you can't transport it over the Jordan, that means you can't transport it over any body of water. So even Beis Hillel would agree in this case. Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva Omer Amalacha Ana de Amri Afle Beis Shammai. I hold even like Beis Shammai. Why? I can look at Beis Shammai Hasam Ele Mishum Diihi Daiko Min Saba Mali Makam Karav Mali Makam Rachok. We both say, why do we believe a woman when she says my husband is dead, even though she's only in Eidach? Why do we believe her? Why do we believe her? Because we assume that a woman is not going to remarry, right, based on either the testimony of an Eid Echad or her own testimony until she does her due diligence, until she really investigates. Because if she's wrong, she's the one who's left with the liability for that. To which the Gemara says, Mali makam karav, mali makam rachok, ha'cha mishum ma'aseh shehaya biyardin ubisfina dahava. Dava ma'aseh gaz rabbanan, b'shar naras lo hava ma'aseh rabbanan, no dahava ma'aseh lo gaz rabbanan. So we'll say, but we assume in the case of the Parah Aduma, Chazal will only go there in the very specific situation of transporting Parah Aduma waters over the Yarden. They both say, what happened? What happened over here? Watch this. My Maisa Shaya. Don't even know. Let's listen to this. Great case. I mean, not a great case, but fascinating case. Maisa ba'adam Shaya mavir mechatas va'efer mechatas biyardin besfina. They will say there was once a guy who was entrusted with transporting ashes of Parah Aduma and Parah Aduma water, right, mixed with ashes, and he was entrusted with transporting it from location A to location B. What did he do? He transported it by boat over the Jordan River. V'nimtza kizayis hames tachav bikarkos shalsina. And I will say they found a kizayis, right, a piece of a kizayis of a corpse lodged on the bottom of the boat, on the floor of the boat. Then I will say, now what happened? What's the unwritten part of the story? The guy who was transporting the ashes and the water had passed over that kizayis of the mace. I will say, what happens if you pass over a kizayis of a mace? Tumas ohel. So I will say everything became ruined. I will say, understand, if you're the guy who ruins Parah Aduma, right? Let's say you're at a Kiddush club. You're for sure out of Kiddush club. I will say, and probably out of many other things as well. I will say it was such a severe situation that they made a gzeira. In that moment, they legislated you cannot transport the waters or the ashes of Parah Aduma by boat or over the Jordan River. Now, I'll point out over here, this is pretty wild, because in halacha, we never do this, right? In halacha, what do you legislate based on? The rove, the majority, the norm. This is such an outlier. But even though it's an outlier, it's such a severe outlier that Chazal felt the need ultimately to go ahead and legislate. So again, you have two cases like this. So interestingly enough, in this case over here, so there's a machlokes. Do we expand this, right? Do we expand this to include other bodies of water? Do we expand this to go ahead and, right? So we'll say that the Rama Paskins that it actually only applies to transporting Parah Aduma waters actually over the Jordan by boat. That's really what it applies to. It doesn't apply to other bodies of water. They both say, so now the same machlokes is over here. So remember again, the original case of a woman testifying about the death of her husband was when husband and wife went to go ahead and harvest wheat together with a group. Husband gets bitten by a snake. Wife comes to Beis Din. My husband's dead. Beis Din accepts her claim. That becomes like the case. So both say, so now the machlokes Hashem Beis Hillel is, do we only believe her in that case? Right? Wheat harvest, same country, is that where we believe her? Or could we even expand it? Beis Hillel says, only like the original case. Beis Shammai says we even expand it. Abba say, well, how do we pass in halacha l'maisa? We know. We pass in like Beis Shammai, but in reality, even Beis Hillel comes around and paskins like Beis Shammai as well, that we could take the original case, expand it, and going back to the previous Mishnah, as long as there is shalom in their marriage and shalom ultimately in the world, halacha l'maaseh, we will accept your testimony. Avosai, shkoyach.